This biplane, a Stamp SV4 basic trainer, was built in Belgium in 1937, the year I was born. During the Second World War it was used by the German Luftwaffe and eventually by the French Air Force. It is now owned by a flying school and I am flying it over the Vale of Gloucester. To the west is May Hill and the Forest of Dean. To the east is the Cotswold Hills, and to the south is the River Severn, winding its way towards the estuary. This flight today has brought back memories of an adventure I was involved in many years ago. This building was once a barn that housed a cattle wagon owned by a local cattle hauler. Around the back of the barn was a lean-to wooden shack that served as the headquarters for the village scouts. We met there on troop nights and on other special occasions. It had a wood-fired cast-iron stove, and for such a modest building, the joy of electric light. No toilets were provided. Scouts had to live up to their motto of, "Be prepared." On reflection, our troop was a well-organised affair with a scoutmaster. They were scoutmasters then, not leaders as they are today. He had a lot of ideas for engaging lads who had no television, computers or mobiles to distract or amuse them. In winter, we would roam the countryside with hurricane lanterns on what we called wide games. It always ended in a rough house, getting very cold and usually muddy, before returning to the scout hut for a mug of hot cocoa. Sometimes in summer there would be a special Sunday game, for which I would beg my parents to let me off chapel, just this once, so that I could join those scouts lucky enough to get parental leave from the rigours of church attendance. There was radio, but very few programmes were of interest to us. Children's Hour, if not soppy, was condescending, and the airwaves seemed filled with the endless theatre organ music churned out by Sandy McPherson and Reginald Dixon. Only Dick Barton, Special Agent, and Paul Temple demanded our attention. Dick, Jock and Snowy, created by the same writers who started The Archers, were so much a part of our lives that impromptu cricket matches would have an agreed break at 6:45 p.m. when we would all go to the nearest friend's house to catch the latest cliff-hanging episode before returning to finish the match. This small pond, now shallow and overgrown, was once 4 times the size. Known as Flash Hole, it was where all the village children came to swim. I spent endless summer days navigating this mud-brown river in an army surplus dinghy, which also doubled as a diving platform. And of course the river bank itself was a constant source of natural wonder. Scouting allowed us many opportunities to emulate our radio heroes, not in solving mysteries or biffing up dodgy villains, not too many of those in our village, but to have dare-and-do adventures like death slides and river rafting. The author of these escapades was Skip, our scoutmaster, who was an ex-World War II pilot. He was a reservist and flew mainly weekends with the RAF 501 squadron based at Filton. He somehow managed to marry his 2 great interests, flying and scouting. We would be given an envelope, not to be opened until the appointed Sunday. The instructions gave us a time to meet and a list of gear necessary for the scheme. Also a map reference for where the action would take place. With our bits and pieces we would work out how to get to the appointed rendezvous, where all would fall into place. Skip's squadron flew de Havilland Vampires. Though there are none of these flying today, a few survive in museums. Designed in the last few months of the war, the plane was first used during the Suez Crisis. Unlike later jets with their sharply angled bodies, the Vampire had a smooth, rounded fuselage that looked for all the world like a Dan-Dare rocket ship from the pages of the Eagle. The plane's Rolls-Royce engine was known as the Goblin. Amazingly, whilst the plane could fly at 530 miles per hour, parts of the airframe were made of balsa wood. We had to be at the map reference at noon, when something would happen. On the top of a prominent hill in the centre of the valley, we set out as instructed, a large letter X. Up there, the whole valley was laid out beneath us in summer sunshine. We drank in the green field scene around us, congratulating ourselves at the good fortune on this day not to have endured another mind-numbing sermon. As we watched and waited, doubts began to creep in as to whether or not we were in the right place. It was too late now, even if we were on the wrong hill. Time seemed to stop still, although the one of us that had a watch was counting down to midday. We waited. Right on time, with a screech of banshees, a flight of jet fighters sped towards us low and direct. We flapped ourselves through the pressure of the shrieking sound bearing down on us, and then they rolled one after the other across the valley to return wagging their wingtips in recognition that we had got the game right. We jumped and rolled around, hugging each other with joy, long after the jets had screamed their way over the hill and out of sight and sound.